Happy first day of online college, team. This is going to be a quick video that goes over our midterm reading exam. I sent out a group me text offering to take pictures of your midterm and send them to you over group me. If you can't remember how you answered things, or if you want to compare and contrast your answers to what I'm showing you here. As a general just overview of it, I did have to curve it. I added half a letter grade, so 5% to everyone's score. And then for those of you that emailed me the day before they canceled classes, my little check-in email, I went ahead and gave you 5% there. So you can go into the grade book and see where that is. And also a reminder, I will be sending out a updated syllabus and updated schedule on Monday. So let's go ahead and go through the identification section of the exam. A quick note about these passage IDs. Our hope is that now that you know it's going to be on a test, and it will be on our final as well, which will be electronic. And I'll show you in a later video how that's going to work. As you're reading, we're hoping that you'll start reading for these passages that are potentially relevant, that will possibly show up on these things. And as we go through these, I hope you'll see that all of these had a significant bearing on the themes in each of the stories and poems that we discuss for our first annotated bibliography. All right, let's head through it here. So Jane Rice's The Refugee 1, the correct quote for that was this one down here, J. It was marvelous that she'd happened to pick up The Werewolf of Paris yesterday, had given her an insight, so to speak. It was extremely handy that she had all that butcher shop background. So that is a great quotation that points to the plot of that text, and also the allusions that are throughout it. Here we have that Werewolf of Paris that Jane Rice was looking at. Alice Walker's To Win. I had a fake one to go with that one. It was right here, and that was C. But the right one is actually right here. Who torments the sacred rest of us lacks confidence in his own worthiness to stand shameless, even poor, and sing. David Foster Wallace says this is Water. It's here, G. The only thing that is capital T true is that you get to decide how you're going to try and see it. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. You get to decide what to worship. 4 here, Richard Hugo, The Freaks at Spurgeon Road Field. We are looking at this one right here, The Afflicted Never Cheer in Unison. Tennessee Williams, The Mysteries of the Joy of Rio is down here. It is N. Remember, this was a text about two closeted homosexuals, one who had just died, and you can see here in his theory, the theory of most immoralists, that the soul becomes intolerably burdened with lies that have to be told to the world in order to be permitted to live in that world. John Collier's Evening Primrose matches up with M, and this is the intricate laws of silence and camouflage which dominate the apparently casual strollings and gatherings of the Midnight Clan. How they detest the night watchman. To me, this was probably one of the easiest to find. Carolyn Forche's The Colonel. I made up a fake one for this one. It's right up here top. He was a leader of men, violent, nasty, etc., maybe a captain, maybe even a general. When, for those of us who paid attention when we went over that in class that day, some of the ears on the ground caught the scrap of his voice. Some of the ears on the floor were pressed to the ground. That is Carolyn Forche's The Colonel. 8's watching the fight at the New Haven Dog Park for Hanif Abdul Rakib. There it is right here. B, that which forces us to bare our teeth is all a matter of perspective. Disillusionment of 10 O'Clock by Wallace Stevens. E, people are not going to dream of baboons and periwinkles. And finally, from Fritz Lieber's Smoke Ghost, it is up here. F, the growing antipathy to grime and soot. Everything he touched seemed gritty, and he found himself mopping and wiping at his desk like an old lady with morbid fear of germs. I hope you guys see that, to me, these aren't arbitrary quotations. They all are very memorable, and in most cases, they do kind of point to the major theme in each of the stories. Let's move on to the shorts answer section. Public and contextual symbols. Most of you guys did a good job on this. Remember, contextual symbols are those which are symbolic mostly in the text, so if we're looking at something like Shirley Jackson's Demon Lover, the dress was a good contextual symbol that a couple of you put in there. In terms of public symbols, a lot of us were getting mixed up with the silver bullet in Jane Rice's The Refugee. That's a public symbol. We knew coming into the text that silver bullets are the things that can kill werewolves. So be aware of what is sort of, I don't want to call it common sense knowledge, but the knowledge that you come into a text with already, that the author plants in there. Secondary sources and reference sources. We had a tough time here. Remember, reference sources are overly general information that kind of get us started on a subject. These are encyclopedias, these are dictionaries. The big thing we want to remember with reference sources is that by and large, they should not be cited in our research. Secondary sources, these are things that accompany the primary text, that are about the primary text. Remember, we have 3 uses for secondary sources. The first is illustrative. This is when the secondary source demonstrates that a problem that we're saying is an issue in the world. The source demonstrates that that is indeed a fact. The second use of a secondary source is for background information, where the conversation is about that big issue. And then finally, the third use of a secondary source is to support your assertions about the interpretation of the text. We're going to go over the organizational strategy for a research project, and you'll see that each one of these uses for a secondary source, they'll go in different places. The illustrative will go towards the beginning, will be introducing the issue. The one that demonstrates that the issue is being talked about and different opinions on the issue, that'll go in a literature review. And the sources that help support our interpretation, they're going to go in what's called the proof of our research projects. Library's catalog and library research databases, we did okay here. The library's catalog are the physical holdings at the library, the things that the library owns. You can check them out. There are electronic resources in there. Streaming videos are part of the part of the library's catalog, and that's the stuff the library owns. Library research databases, these are where we go and find our specialized journals. If you were to explain to an incoming college student why the research databases are preferable to Google, it's because they're curated by librarians, that they are research done by experts in the field. The sources that you're going to get with a general Google search, Google privileges what paid for ads and what is the most popular. And I hope as we're learning now, what is popular isn't always right. So that's what we wanted to get to there. As far as how these titles should be formatted, Avengers Endgame, it should all be italicized and underlined. The Washington Post should all be italicized or underlined. We should leave the Attorney General alone. Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban should be underlined, and the national anthem should be left alone. There was a chance for 10 points on this one since we have 5 of them. Let's talk about this central claim. We're going to come back to this in the video that I'm going to post for next week because we need to be reminded of how to assess central claims. Let's read this one here. I believe Wallace Stevens' Disillusionment of 10 O'Clock and Tennessee Williams' The Mysteries of Joy Rio are unified by their suspicion of normal people and how they marginalized abnormal people simply for being different. This claim is on the right track, but we do need to send it through our heuristic. Remember, SACES, SACES. First, we look for the specificity of the claim. In this case, we have 2 specific things. We have our texts, the story, and the second story. But also we have our major crucial issue, which is the suspicion of normal people and how they marginalized abnormal people, or the general marginalization of the other. So I think it passes the specificity test. It also passes the arguability test because these stories could be about other things, technically. When we get to the confidence and creativity test, we need to make sure that we are taking off these phrases like "I believe" and "in my opinion." This could start just with Wallace Stevens' disillusionment at 10 o'clock and Tennessee Williams's, etc., as the subject. All right. So it's not really passing the confidence thing. I do think, though, that we're good in terms of what it's going to be trying to prove once we get into interpreting the two texts. When we get into explainability, here's where it falls apart. This author has not defined their terms. We don't know how they're unified. 1, 2, 3. We don't know the process of marginalization, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or we don't know the types or areas of social life or sociocultural or political or economic life that they're being marginalized from. Type 1, type 2, type 3. Again, on Monday's video, we are going to go over and do an exercise how we can break down central claims so we can define our terms. And that bleeds over into our final test. Is this suggesting some kind of structure? It is not suggesting some kind of structure because we don't have those 3 terms or 4 terms or 2 halves that have things broken down. Remember, we're always looking to break things down. Almost think like like a tree where you've got like a big category and then those are broken down into 2 categories and then those are broken down into 3 more categories. This is as scientific as we're going to get in writing and it helps us analyze. So this was not an effective central claim, but it could be if we addressed the confidence issue and then we defined our terms here, broke down how the text is examining this marginalization of the other. I'm not going to go into the essay question because a lot of us had different approaches there. This is where if you were to group text me and request your midterm back, you could see how I assess those. But remember, the quotation frame is introduce the quotation with a quick summary, a contextualizing statement, and a attributive phrase. Make sure that you picked something out of this scene that is profitable, something that gives us some event, some action, or a symbol that we could break down. Let's look at this really quick. Suddenly, closing her eyes, she felt an upward surge like a diver emerging from some deeper, greener depth. Even if we just started there and we looked at the image of the diver and depth and compare that to what Truman Capote has, by his own admission in that secondary source I showed you, is exploring in here, which is kind of the psychological tendency, either because of something that's diagnosable like schizophrenia or just being a normal person, having the bicameral mind. The depths that our mind has. Here's where we can see Truman Capote using the metaphor of the ocean, right? Using metaphor of the ocean to try to get us into what psychology is like. In times of terror or immense distress, there are moments when the mind waits as though for a revelation, while a skein of calm is woven over thought. It is like a sleep or a supernatural trance. During this lull, one is aware of a force of quiet reasoning. What if she had never really known a girl named Miriam? So after he gives us this metaphor of the diver, this is the ocean, right? This is the ocean, and that can be dangerous if you are somebody who's suffering from some kind of mental distress. This is all plot right here. We want to stay away from things that are retelling the story. That's one thing I was seeing in a lot of our explanations is y'all were retelling the story as opposed to, digging in and telling us how the passage you picked worked. So going forward, you're going to have one of these to do for today for Ray Bradbury's story, The April Witch. Try to find a scene that has an event, an action, a symbol, or language that you can actually interpret for a wider audience. Don't retell the story. You're supposed to be doing that at the beginning. Give us the quick summary, contextualize where you're pulling your scene from. A good phrase to start with is, in this scene towards the end, or in this scene at the very end. In this particular scene from Miriam, this is the end of the story. Anyways, group text me and I will send you your midterm. You can compare and contrast it to this video. I hope you guys are keeping well. Stay out of trouble. Remember, and I've been glancing over here, I am online live chat every day from 9 to 1 p.m. to answer any of your questions. And we are coming up on 15 minutes, already too long. Be well, guys. I'll talk to you next week.